Once again, Trial Tuesday, the murder trial for George Zimmerman has come to a close with a not guilty verdict, and now he walks free. Attorney David Aylor, who himself has dealt with a high-profile trial like this one, joins us right now to weigh in on the controversial case that's gotten media attention all over the country. So, Counselor, welcome back to the program. First, we're going to talk about the trial a little bit. So, how did each of the two sides present their cases, and why do you think that the prosecution ultimately failed to sway the jury in the end?
Well, I think ultimately they failed because there's so many different parts and the elements of each crime that they were not able to show. They didn't really push too much on the aggressive approach of Mr. Zimmerman. While that was sort of brought out, they seemed to sway a little bit on what exactly happened when the two did encounter. Was Mr. Zimmerman on top? Was Mr. Martin on top? And, you know, the message really just, there was some gray in it. And when there's gray, you have to look at what your job is. And your job is to find someone not guilty, not innocent, but not guilty, you know, if you in fact have that reasonable doubt. And they clearly did.
You think the facts just weren't there?
I think the facts were not there. I don't think the facts were shown because a lot of the facts didn't exist simply because you didn't have third-party witnesses. Had they had that, there may have been things different. But one thing you have to remember is it took almost 2 months before the police even charged Mr. Zimmerman, even though they obviously knew from that evening, the night of the tragedy, that in fact he is the one that had shot Mr. Martin.
Right.
But the fact that it took that long, I mean, that tells you a little bit about the evidentiary side of the case as a whole.
Stand your ground came up, that phrase came up a lot during this trial. Do you think that this was an example of that stand your ground and kind of in correlation with our Castle doctrine that we have here in South Carolina?
Right. Well, you know, a lot of people get a little bit confused between just the self-defense element and then stand your ground. Self-defense is obviously defending yourself at any point from harm. However, the stand your ground goes a little bit further, similar to the Castle doctrine here, where that states, in fact, that, you know, if you're being attacked, whether it be attacked in your home, like we've talked about here on the Castle doctrine, or in any other setting, you do not have to run or you don't have to flee. You can actually stay and defend yourself. So that is what the defense obviously was putting an argument up that Mr. Zimmerman was doing. He was defending himself at that time.
Yeah. David, I want to ask you personally, because you've handled a case like this with a lot of media scrutiny here in town with Ethan Mack and Heather Camp. As a prosecutor or a defense lawyer, what's it like to try and take on a case like that?
Well, really, you just have to kind of keep a blind eye to everything outside of your case. You're so engulfed in what the case is as a whole with your facts and what you're trying to do within the trial. You're always going to have commentators, or people are going to look at it, you know, in the private bar or, of course, on the news and that sort of thing, saying what someone did or didn't do wrong. But you have to have your game plan and really approach it aggressively, just like you would any case, you know, because obviously there's thousands and thousands of cases every day that people don't pay attention to, that the lawyers like myself are still in there fighting for.
Right. As a defense lawyer, do you jump at an opportunity like this?
You know, it really depends on the circumstances. You really got to know, looking at the client, looking at the family, determine whether or not, you know, where they stand financially, because these are very expensive and very time-consuming events for both sides, the
Sure.
state as well as the defense.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the case itself. We're hearing that the Department of Justice might get involved now after this to see if Mr. Zimmerman had any kind of previous, you know, kind of racist tendencies or anything that violated civil rights of another person. Do you think that this is right? Do you have, I mean, is this unprecedented?
Well, I wouldn't say it's completely unprecedented. It's just the controversial nature of the case, obviously, I think, has a knee-jerk reaction with some individuals and, of course, even things like the Department of Justice. But what will be interesting to see if they're able to find anything, because my thought would be that if, in fact, there were some racial issues in Mr. Zimmerman's past, that stuff would have been uncovered and potentially at least attempted to use exactly within the trial. And as far as I heard, there's not been any of that. So I don't know where they're really going to be able to go with that.
This Department of Justice, them kind of getting involved in this case, what's to stop just about everybody who's been convicted of a crime or a misdemeanor from saying, wait, my trial wasn't fair. I want the Department of Justice to take a look at this? Well,
and I think it's going to be on a case-by-case basis, but obviously you have complaints about the system as a whole all the time, no matter what side you're on, victim, defense, the lawyers, the judge, whoever it may be, and there's certain, you know, methods you can take to try to go about that. But in this situation, the Department of Justice, I think, is looking at it simply because you see the amount of attention. They still feel like, and a lot of the public feels like that, you know, it was beyond a terrible tragedy that Mr. Martin died. It was actually a crime, and that's why they want to look at it and see if they can come at another angle. But one thing they cannot do is try to bring any type of murder charges or anything similar, because that basis of fact has already been played out in court.
That would be double jeopardy. Could be a civil trial pending. If there is, of course, David Aylor will be here to break it all down for us. Counselor, thank you so much for coming back. We appreciate it. And more after the break. Make sure you stay with us.